Good morning, everyone. I am Mary D'Angelo, Dean of Admissions, and I will be joined in this session by Troy Davis, our Director of Financial Aid. We appreciate you joining our session this morning. Of course, we would love to be talking with you on campus, but I do want you to know that we will be presenting the same information we present during an in-person open house. Nikki Levine, our Director of Undergraduate Admissions, will be monitoring the chat during this session. If you have questions that you would prefer not to ask during the Q&A at the end of our session, please feel free to click on the links provided for both admissions and financial aid. So our goal during this session is to help you navigate both the admissions process and the financial aid process seamlessly. So let's get started. Here at Springfield College, we accept the Common Application. So that is the only application that students use to apply for admission to Springfield. And we have found since we became a Common Application member that it's really very convenient for students to complete one application and apply to several schools at the same time. So the feedback that we get from students on that has really been very, very positive. When we look at applications here at Springfield College, we really separate the information that students provide us into two distinct areas. One, of course, would be the academic credentials that we require, but the other would be the personal credentials that we require. So I'm going to talk through both of those areas to try to kind of demystify this process for you and give you a sense of what we do with the information that you are kind enough to share with us. The academic review that we conduct does consist of mainly a student's transcript. And when we look at a high school transcript, we are really dissecting it. We're looking at the sequence of courses that a student has taken throughout their 4 years of high school. We are looking at the level of difficulty of that coursework. So students, if you have challenged yourself by taking advanced placement courses, dual enrollment courses, honors courses, that's something that is going to figure in to our review of your academic credentials. The other thing that we are certainly looking at is how a student has done in their courses, so the grades that students receive. And we're looking at grades that students have achieved from their first year all the way through the senior year. And sometimes we talk with students who maybe got off to a slow start in high school. They had a transition from a small middle school to a larger high school, and the transition was difficult for them at first. And they ask us, is that going to be a real problem for me that I didn't do as well in my first year? And what I always like to share with students is we are looking at really a trajectory. And the best trajectory for students to be on is to go in an upward trend. So junior year, senior year, many times students have done very well in both of those years, maybe better than they did in their first year or their first 2 years. And that's important to us. So we do look at a student's trajectory, and certainly an upward trend is something that is very encouraging for us to see. Sometimes students will ask us, what do I have to have? What does my GPA have to be in order for me to be accepted to Springfield College? We don't have a cutoff in terms of GPA, but each year the average GPA for students who we admit tends to be in the 3.3, 3.4 area. But students, I don't want you to think of that as a cutoff because it isn't. It's an average, and many times students like to know what that average is. The thing that you will not see Springfield requiring this year is the results of either the SAT or the ACT. We made a decision to waive that requirement for the programs at Springfield that do require the SATs. Most of our programs do not require an SAT. We went test optional a few years ago, but we do have some programs where we continue to require the SAT or the ACT, but for those programs this year, we have made a decision to waive that requirement given how difficult it has been for students to access either the SAT or the ACT. The other factors that we consider for admission are really more in the personal category. And we're going to be taking a look at the recommendations that you provide us with from a teacher, the recommendation that you provide us with from your school counselor. And those are important to us because it gives us an opportunity to hear from people who have kind of watched you progress throughout your high school career. So we read those carefully, and they are important. And oftentimes we find them to be very, very helpful in terms of sharing information about you that we might not otherwise know. The other personal factor that we consider is your co-curricular activities. So what have you done when you've not been sitting in a classroom, when you've not been studying? And we find that students who apply to Springfield College often present us with a very robust resume of things that they've been involved with. And the reason that that is important to us is because Springfield is a really active campus. There's a lot going on here. And students who tend to choose Springfield and thrive at Springfield are students who have come from that kind of a background in high school. So whether it be community service, things that you do outside of school, work activities that you've participated in, jobs that you've had either through the school year or through the summer, being involved in clubs, organizations, athletics, student government. Those are things that we will typically see students presenting to us as part of the admissions process. The final personal factor that we consider is the essay that you write as part of the Common Application. And I always encourage students to select the prompt for that essay where they think they're going to be able to share the most with the admissions committee about them and what makes them unique as a person. So we do read it. We didn't ask you to do it, and just for an exercise of frustration, because we know oftentimes that's what students put off as the final piece. We like to read the essay. We learn a lot about you, and we find that most students really do a great job with communicating through that essay. One thing that I'm going to talk about regarding the financial aspects of coming to Springfield College is academic scholarships. Troy's going to cover a lot of other information about need-based financial aid. But the reason that I talk about academic scholarships is because we award scholarships to students based on academics through the admissions process. So each transcript that we evaluate, the admissions staff is recalculating your high school grade point average. And the reason we do that is because we want to make sure that if we're provided with an unweighted GPA on your transcript, we want to make sure that we're giving you credit. And so we will do a recalculation to take into account the level of difficulty of your coursework and the grades that you've received throughout your 4 years. So this screen does provide you with information about our scholarship levels. And we find that they are very, very competitive in terms of what schools offer for academic scholarships. This information is on our website, so you don't have to rush to write everything down because we're very transparent with this. It's part of our financial aid website, so certainly you can access that at any time you want. But what you're going to see is that every student who applies to Springfield does receive consideration for a merit scholarship at the levels that we've outlined here. As you can see from this slide, some of our deadlines have passed, but I think the deadline that really for many of you is most important is the deadline for rolling admissions. And even though we list April 1st as our deadline for rolling admissions, that is not a firm and final deadline. We certainly expect that we will be dealing with students who have a desire to apply to Springfield after April 1. And particularly this year, students, given the many, many challenges you faced due to the pandemic, we certainly understand that there will be students who make decisions on where they're going to apply to college a little bit later. And that is absolutely fine with us. Don't feel badly. We understand that there's been a lot of uncertainty for you this year, and we want to assure you that we are prepared to work with you, both from an admissions perspective and also in terms of reviewing a financial aid application well past April 1st. So please don't be nervous about that deadline. What rolling admissions means is that you apply as soon as you complete all of your required credentials. That's the point that we review your application. And typically, unless we need additional information, and if we do, we'll ask you for that. But typically, once a student goes into review, they can expect a decision from us within a couple of weeks. And then shortly thereafter, if they've completed the financial aid application, they can expect to hear from the financial aid office as well. The other thing that really we're not working with at this point in the process is our early decision programs. So I don't know if there are any juniors on this call, but if there are, firstly, welcome, and good for you for getting a little bit of a head start on all of this. But early decision at Springfield College is designed for students who have Springfield as their first choice. So they've made that decision that if they get accepted, and if they receive a favorable financial aid award, they do plan to enroll at the college, and they have an earlier deadline in terms of letting us know that. So for any of you juniors, as you go through the process and you determine that Springfield is your first choice, you are welcome to apply early decision 1 or early decision 2. And at this point, I am going to turn the program over to my colleague, Troy Davis.
Good morning. I'm Troy. I'm the Director of Financial Aid here at Springfield College, and we're going to talk about financial aid at a pretty high level, and we're going to cover a variety of topics related to financial aid. Some things that we're going to talk about are cost of attendance, expected family contribution, and EFC. That's a term you're going to hear a lot of in the financial aid process. What is financial need? The categories, types, and sources of financial aid. We'll talk about the free application for federal student aid called the Fafsa, and what to do if there are special circumstances. This is something that we've always handled, but we're seeing an awful lot of special circumstances right now because of the pandemic, and the actual Springfield College application process. So let's get started. Financial aid is a partnership. It is a partnership between the student and family, Springfield College, and federal government agencies that could include state agencies as well. Each of us have a role to play in making sure that the financial aid process runs smoothly and serves the student. So in financial aid, we use something called a cost of attendance. It includes both direct and indirect expenses. It is larger than the actual bill for financial aid, but it is a number that we use to determine eligibility for financial aid. Direct costs include tuition and fees, room and board if the student is living on campus. Indirect costs include books and supplies, personal miscellaneous, and transportation to and from campus. Those two numbers combined, added together, equal the cost of attendance to attend the school. Every school has a cost of attendance, and they vary widely. You will have low-cost community colleges, you'll have private colleges like Springfield College, and then you'll have some high-price private colleges as well. So you'll see a wide variety in that cost of attendance number. At Springfield College, our 21-22 costs are listed here. We have not increased our costs over the 2021 academic year. So the total billed cost for a student living on campus would be $53,800 for an academic year. Another term that you're going to hear a lot in the financial aid process is expected family contribution, or EFC. An EFC is a calculation of what the family can reasonably contribute towards that student's education for one academic year. There are two components. There are parents' contribution and a student's contribution, and those two things are added together to come up with the family contribution. Both components include look at income and assets. It's calculated using data that is collected on the federal application form, or the Fafsa. And many private schools also calculate their own EFC using a secondary application, such as an institutional application or the College Board's profile. We do not do that at Springfield College. We are a Fafsa only school, so there is only one application to complete for financial aid at Springfield College. This defines what financial need is, and this is what we do in a financial aid office on a very, very basic level. We start with that cost of attendance number, both direct and indirect expenses. We subtract the expected family contribution, which is the result of filing the Fafsa, and what we're left with is financial need. And that's the number that we're trying to meet as close as possible for families. So there are different categories of financial aid. Categories of financial aid is divided into two major categories. First is gift aid. Gift aid is divided into two subcategories, that being scholarships and grants. They work basically the same way for a family, but they mean two different things in a financial aid office. A scholarship is money that is awarded to a student who demonstrates some sort of talent or ability that we hope that student is going to continue to demonstrate on our campus. There are usually strings attached to that money. The student is going to have to participate in a certain activity. The student has to maintain a certain grade point average and enrollment status. The student may not be able to break enrollment to continue to receive that scholarship. Grants are awarded to students based on financial need. That need is defined by the organization funding the grant. So the federal government has a definition of need, and Springfield College has a definition of need. Grants can change from year to year as a family's financial situation changes. So if the number in college or the number in household changes from one year to the next, or we see a significant change in income from one year to the next, grants may change. The second category of financial aid is self-help, and the name tells us something about it. The student has to do something in order to receive this money. The first type of self-help is loans. The student has to agree to repay that loan at a later date. And the second type of self-help is work study. And work study is a little bit of an oddball in the financial aid world. We calculate eligibility and award financial aid from the financial aid office, but it does not credit the bill. Financial aid, work study is money that students earn over the course of the academic year, up to that work study award amount. So students are paid for the hours that they work. Financial aid comes from a variety of sources, including the federal government, state governments, the colleges and universities themselves, and don't forget civic and religious organizations and private foundations, as well as employers. And we'll talk about employers in just a moment. This graph, which didn't actually come out very well, it's probably kind of hard to read, but I wanted to put this up to show how generous Springfield College's financial aid program is. The medium blue area is federal financial aid. The light blue area is a combination of state and private scholarships, and the maroon area is the amount of money that Springfield College awards to students in the 2021 academic year. The federal government awards money primarily based on need, and that need is determined by filing the Fafsa. The student must file a Fafsa every year to be determined, to be considered for federal financial aid. Federal financial aid programs that we have or participate in at Springfield College include the Federal Pell Grant, the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, Federal Work Study, direct loans for students, as well as direct loans for parents, or those are called PLUS loans. States also have need-based programs. They usually have residency. They can be awarded based on need or merit, but most of them are need at this point. They use information collected from the Fafsa, and the deadlines by state vary. In Massachusetts, the published deadline is May 1st. That varies a little bit year to year depending on how many applications they have, as well as they did extend it this year because of the pandemic. Private sources include foundations, businesses, and charitable organizations, and deadlines and applications vary widely from each organization. You want to begin this research for private scholarships early. I would say no later than the summer before your the freshman year in college. And it's a process that should continue through the spring semester of the senior year of college. Students should continue to research that money because this is the fastest and easiest way to affect the bottom line due to the college. You want to, and don't forget information available through your local high school or public library. Some organizations are very, very local and don't advertise nationally, and they would make that information available through your high school or library. I want to talk about employers for a moment because many companies offer scholarships, competitive scholarships available to children of employees, or they may also offer an educational benefit to their employees. Say, for example, they have a requirement that the student attain a B, and they will give you a certain amount of money for that grade. So at the end of each semester, you would take the student's report card to the HR office and you would get reimbursed for those grades. That's something you want to investigate through your company and HR office. So to get financial aid, you need to complete a free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. It's a standard form that collects both demographic and financial information about the student and parents. It can be filed electronically or using a paper form. However, well over 99% of our students file the form electronically. It's available in English and Spanish, and there's really two steps to filling out the FAFSA. The first is obtaining a signature, an electronic signature, and that's done through fsaid.ed.gov. The student will need an electronic signature, and one parent will need an electronic signature to sign the FAFSA, as well as other federal documents that we will need later in the process. But the FAFSA is actually completed at studentaid.gov. In the last couple of years, the Department of Ed has consolidated several websites into one site called studentaid.gov, and you complete the FAFSA at that site. It can be filed anytime during prior to the academic year, but no earlier than October 1st. So it opens on October 1st before the student's senior year, in the student's senior year in high school and before the freshman year in college. So for the 21-22 academic year, the FAFSA opened on October 1st, 2020. So the reason we like students to do the FAFSA on the web or the electronic version are there's several built-in edits to help you avoid some errors, costly errors. For example, if you said there were 3 in the house and 7 in college, the FAFSA is going to question you on that and say, maybe you might have those 2 numbers switched around. There's skip logic built in. So depending on how you answer questions early in the application, it may skip certain questions later in the application. So that means your application may not look like your best friend's FAFSA. Those questions may be different. There's also an optional DRT. It is optional, however, we really strongly encourage families to use it. The DRT stands for Data Retrieval Tool, and it will link your FAFSA to the IRS system and bring your 1040 information over into the FAFSA and complete it for you. So once you use the DRT, there's actually very few questions left to answer on the FAFSA. There's detailed instructions and help along the way. You can check the status of your application online, and it's a simplified process in the future. The Department of Ed rolls forward certain demographic information from year to year. So when you go in to fill in a renewal FAFSA, many of the questions are already answered for you. And you would simply need to do the DRT and answer a few more questions, and you've completed a second or third or fourth year's FAFSA. Special circumstances. Special circumstances cannot be reported on the FAFSA. So you need to send an explanation to each financial aid office of schools that you've applied to, and the college will review those circumstances. They may request additional documentation from you, and the decisions are final. You may receive different decisions from two different schools, and they cannot be appealed to the Department of Education. Some special circumstances that we look at here at Springfield College include a change of employment status, medical dental expenses not covered by insurance, a change in the parent's marital status since filing the FAFSA, as well as unusual dependent care expenses. And that can include elder care as well. At Springfield College, we use a financial aid portal called My Financial Aid, and it's available. We make it available to students shortly after the admissions decision is rendered and the student is accepted or is offered acceptance. Login credentials are sent shortly after that admissions decision. So from the portal, students can upload their documents, they can view, accept, or decline their awards, they can track their application materials and link to certain application documents that can be completed online. We have a scholarship search page inside the portal, and you can read important messages that are related to your financial aid. There may be specific terms that are tied to a specific piece of financial aid you're receiving. So that's the end of my presentation. We now have time for questions, and I think Nikki is going to help us out with that.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions that came in. The first is more for you, Troy. Will the financial aid award stay relatively similar each year, or should families expect a change in the amount in their financial aid award each year?
Financial aid stays approximately the same year to year as long as the family's financial situation stays the same year to year. So as long as there's no significant increase or decrease in income or assets, as well as no change in the household size or the number in college, a family should expect approximately the same award every year.
Great, thank you. The next one is about merit. So Mary, this one is for you. Is there an opportunity for students to receive a bump in their merit award if they're really close to that next tier of merit scholarship?
Sure, yes, that's a great question, and it's a question that we get often. There are times where a student, for example, might be a 3.7 GPA, which means that they're just 0.1 away from our top merit award, which is our trustee level. So we will round up in a case like that. So if a student is that close, we will round up to the next merit level, to take into account the fact that a student was just a 0.1 difference away from the next level.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Troy. Once a student is accepted, how long does it typically take before they receive their financial aid award?
Assuming that we have a Fafsa that comes in at the time of the admissions decision, or we actually have it before the admissions decision, it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 days to receive a financial aid award from us.
Awesome. And we do have one final question. Mary, this one is for you. Since the deadlines have passed for those limited enrollment programs, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and physician assistant, is it possible for students that are just applying now to internally transfer into those programs down the line?
So internally transferring into any of our limited enrollment programs, and those are the programs that Nikki just mentioned, is only possible on a space available basis. So for example, we each year bring 35 students into our physician assistant program. If halfway through the academic year, if a space becomes available, so the 35 students that came in, one of them decided to change their major to biology or sport biology. If that does happen, we will make that information known to current students that there is an opportunity to apply for that spot. And that is something that is handled at that point by the academic department, by the physician assistant faculty. And they have an internal application process that students can go through. If spaces do not become available in those limited enrollment programs, and we have students on campus who are very, very interested in becoming a PA, becoming a physical therapist, becoming an occupational therapist, we have bachelor's degree programs that students can take where through the program, through their 4 years here at Springfield, they can take all of the necessary prerequisites that they need in order to apply for graduate degrees in those areas. And all of those areas at this point do require graduate degrees. So if a student is here in our health science major and at the end of their sophomore year, they say, I really want to become an occupational therapist, they can work with their advisor to make sure that all of the courses that they're taking through the health science program will help them to fulfill the prerequisites for a graduate degree in occupational therapy.
Awesome. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to ask away.
And I know that I speak for Troy and for Nikki by saying that we are always available to answer your questions. We understand that this can be a very complex process, and we want to ensure you that both financial aid counselors and admissions counselors are available to work with you. There is no such thing as a stupid question. This is a big decision, and we want to make sure that you feel comfortable reaching out either by phone or by email to ask any questions that you have along the way. So thank you for joining us today. It was great of you to take a part of your Sunday to be with us, and we wish you a lot of success in the process. Take care, everybody.